There's going to be some long touchdowns here. Just get your CBS Sports turned on, get some popcorn, and we're going over 57.5 here.
Your team, I'm in on them. Playing a lot better after the bye. Rice, catching way too many.
And I don't understand this number whatsoever, and I don't understand why it ticked up.
The Big Bets on Campus podcast.
All right, here we go.
What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the Week 9 college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey, joining me as always, fellow BBOC co-host Collin Wilson. Have a lot to get to today. By the way, even if you aren't watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Just go to YouTube, helps us grow the new channel. But we're going to get to our marquee games. We'll get to the rundown. We'll go 3 and out. We'll get to some trash, talk some Arkansas football. A lot to get to. I'll go over some quarterback injuries as well. I actually love this slate. I think it's one of the more underrated ones of the season. I mean, it starts with Boise UNLV with college football playoff implications on Friday night. I mean, Washington, Indiana, college football playoff implications. Bama, Missouri is an elimination game, in my opinion, for the playoff. LSU, Texas A&M, college football playoff, SEC implications.
Notre Dame Navy is a college football playoff.
Yeah, Notre Dame. I mean, there's a bunch of top 25 matchups. Texas, Vandy, Illinois, Oregon. Rivalry games, the Sunflower Showdown. We'll talk about that. Florida State, Miami even is a rivalry. Michigan State, Michigan. Will Central Michigan shave again? We'll see. There's a bunch of undefeated ranked teams going on the road. BYU, Penn State, SMU. BG Toledo, I think, is the winner of that game is going to go to the MAC championship. A lot of good football. This
The last time everyone complained that it was a bad slate, all the top 25 teams lost. So just be prepared. At your Halloween parties, when you got your costumes on this weekend, just make sure and check out the TV. There's probably going to be some upsets.
Yep. Expect some chaos as always. But let's get right into, by the way, some of the marquee games you might think are marquee, we covered in 3 and Out, which we record live 6 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel. We covered all the games on Friday night. Let's see, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Oregon, Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, UCF, BYU, North Texas, Tulane. So all those games will be covered at the end. But let's jump into our marquee matchups of the weekend. All right, let's get a quick one out of the way. Missouri at Alabama. Yeah. I mean, Alabama out to like a 17-point favorite here against Missouri. Brady Cook is out. It's going to be Drew Pine. I mean, it's going to be ugly.
The Arizona State Notre Dame graduate, Drew Pine.
Yeah, this could look like Texas A&M versus Missouri, in my opinion. It's a big drop off to Pine. Missouri offense already wasn't playing that well. Here's the thing, though. I think Jalen Milroe also hurt from watching him last week. Mm-hmm. So, what's my play on this game? I mean, if I had to take a side, I'm laying it with Alabama. My play on this game, assuming Alabama's going to be up big at the half, second half under in this game. I also don't mind the full game under. But at anything above 51.
I was going to go first half under. So I
don't mind that either. But my thought process on the second half under is I think Milroe's hurt. So they got to protect him. They want to build a lead and then just get out of there with a win, because then their season comes down to the LSU game and they're going into a bye. So it's like, get to the bye, get healthy. They're not going to run Milroe when they don't have to. Mm-hmm. Which takes a huge element away from their offense. So, and then I just don't see Missouri doing much with Drew Pine. So I think the game would die if Alabama had a big lead. But I don't mind the game under or the first half under as well. It's hard to see Missouri doing much.
Yeah, for me, it was a first half under, in which I think the number, there's like 27s disappearing as you and I are talking about this. I probably better get on if that's the way I want to go. And I think the thinking behind it was the rushing offense on Alabama has just disappeared. Like, when are we going to say we're taking over the trench, we're going to establish the rush, and we're going to pound it all the way? Well, wouldn't you do that against a Missouri offense that is missing their quarterback and missing Nate Noel at running back? Like, this Missouri offense is going to be lifeless. Not to mention they're already like 90th in offensive finishing drives, and they played a soft schedule. They have problems scoring anyways. So if you're Alabama and you're Kalen DeBoer and you need to get your running backs back on track because they've been off, this would be the game to do it. Not to mention Missouri's defense is outside the top 100 or I'm sorry, they're outside the top. They're outside the top 100 and allowing rush explosives, which is perfect for Alabama to try to break one off. Look at Justice Haynes. He's not had an explosive run since week 5 against Georgia. Jamarian Miller, he's had one explosive run since week 3 against Wisconsin. And Milroe couldn't get outside the pocket against Tennessee. With his health information, I don't expect him to do that, but he's only had one explosive the last 3 games. So to me, this was the game where Kalen DeBoer could go into the first half. I could only wish it was in the Jefferson Pilot time slot. It's not. But go into the first half and say, we are establishing the rush. We need to be a trench team. This is a defense we can do it against. More importantly, I need to save my quarterback from getting beat up, and I don't fear the Missouri offense. So I agree with you on your play with the unders. I think I like first half under better just because you're trying to predict, is Kalen DeBoer going to come out from the beginning and say, I'm establishing the rush because I know I'm not going to be challenged?
Yeah, you can see it. Unders across the board. And if I had to, I would lay it with Alabama. All right, let's move on to a game we already mentioned. Noon Eastern on Big Ten Network between Washington and Indiana. Maybe we'll have our first head-to-head here. I like Washington. I do need 7. I actually think they got a chance to win this game outright. I faded Cincinnati last week for the first time all season. Didn't go well. He's been a machine. He's 21-2 over his past 23 games, tied with Kirby Smart for the best record among all coaches. But here's the thing. I mean, Washington's coming off of a bye, which I think should be really beneficial for a really good head coach for a team that had so much turnover. I think that bye will serve them well. They'll clean up some of the things that have really been plaguing them, like the penalties, the red zone. But this is the best offense just overall by far. Very balanced with Coleman and like Rodgers. They have 2 really good receivers. This offense is very good. But here's the thing. Number one, I had Washington power rated better, higher than Nebraska. Nebraska was catching 7 last week in Indiana. That was with Curtis Rourke. If this was 7 and Rourke was in this game, I wouldn't play Washington after upgrading Indiana again last week. But I think that the drop off is significant. I know that Taven Jackson came in last week and they put up 28 in the second half. That was all in short fields. I mean, Nebraska just quit in that game. It was really pathetic. Rourke has been unbelievable. I mean, like NFL ready. He's PFF's highest graded passer. He's number 1 in passer rating at 128.9, 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 78% adjusted completion percentage to go along with a 10.5-yard ADOT. He's been superb, making unbelievable throws. His perfect command of that offense. Jackson was pretty shaky last year. I think he'll be better than he was last year. He's got a little bit more experience. This system is better, but there's got to be a material drop off from Rourke to Jackson. Yeah. So I have to take Washington here. They've already dealt with this early kick, and they're coming off a bye too when they went to Iowa, which was a misleading final. They've been pretty unlucky. This team has been, just look at their underlying metrics. They're good. So with the Rourke drop off, I project this at 4.5. So I like Washington. You disagree?
I'm not fading. I'm not going against you. I can tell you that. I'm not going to back Indiana with a backup quarterback with a big drop off at quarterback. Just like you said, Curtis Rourke is a monster drop off, and I don't understand this number whatsoever, and I don't understand why it ticked up. I took it at 5.5. I was happy with that. It was a number I thought should have been closer around 9 or 10, and then without Rourke, I thought 5.5 was good, and I thought there would be kind of a pile on and a reverse. The market's not really going the way that I thought, but because there's one thing that I can't get out of my brain about Indiana. If you want to put it on the board that we're going against each other, I did take 5.5. I'm not sure how comfortable I'd be with 6.5, but
I took 7, so we don't need.
Yeah. So listen, Taven Jackson, there's really high hopes around this Indiana program that he's going to be something special, but I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen it, and I haven't seen it in the rushing numbers. I haven't seen it in the passing numbers. I'm not really sure, what it is that they see because it hasn't been on the field so far. And I think the good news for Jackson right now with Indiana is that their havoc number allowed for Indiana is 9th overall in the nation of all offenses. And Washington is just kind of midway in the FBS and pass rushing and takeaways. I just don't expect them to get to Jackson whatsoever. So I can't see any quick scoop and scores, sacks and strips. And I just don't see that coming out of this Washington defense on Jackson. He should be very well protected. But the one thing stuck that I just cannot get over is the last time Washington made this trip to the Midwest, Iowa just went rush explosive crazy all over him. I mean, just blew him out of the water on the ground.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern here.
Washington's best attribute on defense is against the pass. I mean, Steve Belichick has been fantastic. Coverage 14th, number one nationally in defensive pass EPA. You're just not getting anything down the field through the air. Well, guess what? Indiana didn't plan on throwing with Taven Jackson anyways. So what you have to do is you have to handicap that rush explosive element that Iowa was able to throw down on Washington when the Huskies were on the road. Tyson Lawton, Justice Ellison, 16 combined TDs on the season. Ellison last week had 105 versus Nebraska. He's up to 4.8 yards after first contact. That's just going to be tough for a Washington defense. They've been great against zone read concepts. And Indiana has run a heavy amount of zone read. We know that with Curtis Rourke. That's Curtis Rourke's game. But the problem is that's not what they're going to run with Jackson. They're going to run a little bit of power football. And you look at Washington's splits against man, counter, zone read. They're pretty fantastic against that opposing rushes to do that. They have been destroyed against power rush. And Indiana has a 73% success rate with rushing attempts using power concepts behind Lawton and Ellison. So that is a big part of why I was on the very first bet with Indiana, because there was such a big advantage there. Does Indiana defense dial it up? I mean, Washington's 115th in pass blocking. Indiana's defense is still, more havoc-minded than almost any other team in the country with Kirk Cignetti there. Washington has severe struggles in scoring position, 111th in offensive finishing drives, and Indiana's top 10 in defensive quality drives, which means, is Washington going to create a methodical and get down the field? Maybe not. If they get into scoring position, it's just, I feel like crawling through a desert looking for a drink of water with this Washington offense trying to score points. Like, hooray, we got into scoring position. Shit, we didn't get any points. Like, that's the way it feels. Also stuck, last thing. Major special teams disadvantage here for Washington, 133rd per SP plus, Indiana 12th. So I'm comfortable with my 5.5. I'm not going to buy off. I just need Indiana to survive here for some of the bracket shenanigans we had earlier this week.
Notre Dame, Navy, undefeated Navy in MetLife Stadium, taking on Notre Dame. This game's extremely difficult for me to handicap because, again, Navy has been a machine against the spread. They've also been an over machine. They really haven't played anyone outside of Memphis. They won that game 56-44. They gave up close to 700 yards. When you adjust for opponent, their defense has not been good. And this is by far the best defense they will face. And Notre Dame has proven it against a good schedule. So normally I'd be running to the window to bet Navy in this spot. Their offense has been good. The new modified wing T, spread option, triple option, hybrid under new offense coordinator Drew Cronick has been great. I have a weird feeling about this game that Notre Dame's just going to blow them out. Notre Dame loses games like this when they're, it's like sleepy spot, but Navy is ranked. Notre Dame knows it needs to win out to get to the college football playoff. Also, Notre Dame's offense playing better of late. Riley Leonard getting used to that system. They should be able to run the ball here. Can Navy surprise them earlier, play keep away enough? Here's the thing. This line was like 11, 12. I think it's going to go up. I think Notre Dame's going to get sharp money. So I'll consider Navy, 14 or above. That's usually a key number with these service academies when they're catching double digits. But it's just hard for me to gauge how good this Navy team really is due to the quality of competition that they've played. And this Notre Dame defense is just on a different level than what they've played. Remember last year, again, wasn't the same offense, but Notre Dame beat them, 42-3 over in Ireland.
Right.
So if I had to take it, right now, there's just a lot of uncertainty. I would probably just throw a little couch change on Navy money line due to the uncertainty, but I have a feeling this could be a long day for Navy. But I might get there if this gets above 2 touchdowns. I'm waiting. I think there's going to be more Notre Dame money that comes in. What do you see here?
A lot of words coming on Action Network for me about this game because I really want to digest what Navy's been doing on offense and if Notre Dame is going to be able to stop it. So let's talk about the other side of the ball really quick because it's a real quick handicap. Notre Dame is going to manhandle this Navy defensive front. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, 4.2 and 5.2 yards after first contact, using inside zone read concepts that Navy absolutely cannot defend. Navy's 132nd in strength of schedule. They have a 38% success rate against inside zone, bottom 20D in stuff rate. Just take my word for it. Notre Dame is going to run wild on this Navy defense. But the question is the other side of the ball. That is definitely the most interesting part of the game. And keep in mind, as I tell, all these things about what Notre Dame can do, Marcus Freeman got into his presser on Monday and spoke specifically like, what is the prep against an offense like this? Well, we prepared a lot in the summer, but oh, whoops, Drew Cronick comes in from Mercer and we see Navy on film and it's way more than the triple option, right? Because generally, these teams have triple options on their schedules or practicing it in the summer. Well, that's what Marcus Freeman did. But then all of a sudden he's got the Delaware wing T, he's got the spread option, he's got fullback power, he's got the triple, he's got everything going on. So Freeman spoke,
lots of misdirection, play action, and
lots, and so you get the head coach speak of it only matters how disciplined we are. I think the one thing
high discipline, that's all it comes down to.
And I think the one thing that he said that really kind of triggered my thinking about the way this game is going to go, he said, you cannot simulate the speed in which Navy runs this offense. We have to stay disciplined. What that means to me is that no matter who the scout team is for Notre Dame, they are not going to be able to replicate what this Navy team does. They're not going to be able to replicate Blake Horvath. They're not going to be able to replicate anything, especially at the speed. So let's go talk just real quickly here, right? Can Notre Dame stop fullback dive? I'm going to say no. Defensive interior Howard Cross and Riley Mills are outside the top 140 of PFF grading of all defensive interiors against rush grading. Can Notre Dame contain the edge when Blake Horvath decides that he wants to play keeper? I'm going to say no again. There are 4 different edge players that are rotating in on known rushing attempts and opponents. Only Joshua Burnham is the only one that's in the top 200 of PFF's grading of edges, and he's got a lot of missed tackles. That's not disciplined. Navy's first few series, by the way, I agree with you, Stuck. I think Notre Dame's going to blow them out. But Navy's first few series, I think, should absolutely catch Notre Dame off guard. Navy is the second highest scoring team in the nation in the second quarter. Those points completely fall off in the second half. Why? Because defenses have seen the speed, they've learned their discipline, and they stick to it, and they make better tackles, and they slow the Navy offense down in the second half. So for
Notre
me,
Dame has been good at adjusting too under Golden.
Completely. So for me, what I see is Navy is going to get their points in the first half. I think the first 3 or 4 series, Notre Dame's just their head's going to be spinning. I think edge is going to miss tackles. I think fullback dive is going to work, and Blake Horvath's going to get a couple play action passes.
And that's where you're going to see some, you probably could see some wrinkles, some trick plays that could catch Notre Dame off guard.
So what I think the script for me is, personally, I've already put in a bet on a first half over. I think Navy's just going to they're going to come over and Notre Dame's going to be like, what do we have to do to stop this? At some point, they're going to figure it out. And when they figure it out, that Notre Dame offense is still going to rush wild. I like the first half over in this game. And somewhere around the second quarter, Marcus Freeman's going to figure it out. And if he doesn't, he's going to figure it out in the locker room. And then I think Notre Dame's second half bet or a Notre Dame live bet, depending on the middle 8 here. Navy is 112th in the middle 8. You can say whatever you want about Brian Newberry and bringing Drew Cronick in at offensive coordinator. They have not managed to clock the 4 minutes before the half or the 4 minutes after the half. So for me personally, I think, Stuck, I am going to go grab one of these 13.5s, but I really want a live bet when Navy runs out of steam with this speed that Marcus Freeman can't show in practice. Well, after 3 series, they're going to know what it is, and then I think Notre Dame takes the game over.
Yeah, I would wait, though. You might as well wait to see the 14 pops. I think you might see one.
No, for Notre Dame, I'm going to get a Notre Dame.
Oh, for Notre Dame. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I think
I would do that because I think that a 14 might eventually pop.
Right.
Let's go to primetime for our final marquee game. LSU at Texas A&M. My biggest regret of the weekend was not betting LSU plus 3.5. I know that you did. I mean, I make it 3 and I'm higher than the market on Texas. I'm higher on everyone than Texas A&M coming into the year. But I knew that it was going to come down. And this game, it's very difficult for me to handicap because Texas A&M is a very tricky team to figure out. I mean, they look like gods against Missouri. It comes down to Connor Wegman, right? Then you have some games where you had Marcel Reed at quarterback. Wegman, the first game of the year against Notre Dame, we saw how bad he looked. Against Missouri, he was flawless. Against Mississippi State, not so much. Which version of Connor Wegman do we get? They've also had some offensive line injuries. Can LSU take advantage of that? And meanwhile, LSU, it's like, I think that they're trending up. Their defense is playing better under a new defensive coordinator. Whit Weeks, some of their young guys on the defensive line. Whit Weeks is playing like at an all-American level at linebacker.
Yep.
But you also have to keep in mind, I mean, this is like the third straight big game for LSU too, and it's going on the road in a hostile environment. They just, they played an overtime game against Ole Miss, and they went up to Arkansas. Tough spot. For what it's worth, though, I think Brian Kelly has been extremely successful in this spot. He hasn't been great at LSU against ranked teams on the road, but for his career, he is 14-3-1 against the spread on a road trip, second consecutive game or more on the road when his team's on normal rest or less. His last loss came back in 2006 with Central Michigan. So he's been good in this spot for what it's worth. But LSU, you got to keep in mind, like, they should have lost to South Carolina. Got bailed out by the refs. They should have lost to Ole Miss. They had to, a couple fourth down conversions late. Ole Miss had some injuries. And so, like, this is a team that's very close to having 3 losses. Now, Texas A&M could have lost to Arkansas, a team that LSU blew out. Texas A&M only beat Bowling Green at home by 6. So these two teams are tough for me to crack. I have Texas A&M. I have LSU power rated slightly ahead of Texas A&M, but the home field in this spot is pretty big, which is why I'm around a field goal. This game is huge. I mean, the winner of this driver's seat for a college football playoff berth, sole possession of first place in the SEC. I think the key to this game is 2 things. Which version of Connor Wegman do you get?
Mm-hmm.
Do you get the good or bad? And number 2, the battle in the trenches on the other side of the ball. LSU's offense is not explosive. It's like Nussmeier, who's been great, just like efficiently moving the ball, making all the right reads. He's been great at avoiding sacks and moving the ball down efficiently. Can the Texas A&M defensive line, which is very talented, beat a very talented LSU offensive line, especially when it comes to pass protection, and get Nussmeier behind the sticks and get this LSU offense behind the chains, get him into known passing downs, 3rd and long? That's the key for me, because the LSU offense isn't explosive. They're going to have to methodically move the ball down the field. Texas A&M does a really good job taking away explosive plays with their safeties. They have a really good corner to match up with Kyron Lacey. So how many negative plays can they create to kill drives? That matchup in the trenches is huge. I think those are the 2 keys to the game. Right now, I would lean Texas A&M. Now the line's down to 1. I have a Texas A&M to make the college football playoff ticket. So I'll be rooting for Texas A&M, but hard team to trust. Not sure I trust LSU, but definitely would have liked to have a 3.5 in my pocket. What are you seeing here?
I make this game Texas A&M -1. I snap bet LSU plus 3.5 on open. I would have played it at 3. I'd have played it at 2.5. Shout out to our college football editor, Pete Rudin. I wrote this up early Tuesday morning, and then I sat on it for 48 hours because I wanted to see where the market was going to go. I had no clue. We were going to down to 2.5. Boom. Then today, a lot of movement down to 1, exactly where we power rate the number. The advantage to me still lies with LSU, and it's a small advantage. So if you're going to bet this game, I would make it one of my smaller size bets, but I still would go with LSU. I think it's a true coin flip situation. Both defenses are in the top 10 from a havoc perspective. Texas A&M, top 10 in defensive line yards. They're going to be able to shut down freshman running back Caden Durham. Kind of been hit or miss. He did have 3 touchdowns against Arkansas, but he's still not creating a lot of space after he gets touched. 3.2 yards after first contact. And the LSU defense, though, when you go to that side, they're emerging. You just kind of look at their numbers on paper and you say, this is not who they are. You kind of have to go in. And that's why I tweeted out a picture of the Maryland eye on defense. I mean, Blake Baker got into his bag against Arkansas. And what he did is he lined up four defenders in a row, like a Maryland I formation on defense over the center. Why did he do that? Because he wanted a quarterback spy on Talon Green, but he didn't want Arkansas to identify which defender that was going to be. There's some masterclass defensive calls coming out of this LSU down here, which I was really impressed with. The LSU defense has been generating a pass rush, and the Texas A&M pass blocking is 34th. So I do think there can be some hands in Connor Weigman's face. Edge Braden Swinson is going to be all over Connor Weigman, which will bring his numbers down because he's not been as good under pressure this season. It's been a factor.
Santos might be out too, one of their best offensive linemen.
That is another part of this, why I think LSU still has the edge, even though I make this Texas A&M -1. I think the other thing too is when you look at this Texas A&M defense, it's always been known that Elko is in love with the 4-2-5, right? That's what he was at Notre Dame when he was an assistant for Brian Kelly. That's what brought him down to Texas A&M, Duke, here, 4-2-5, or you can call it 2-4-5, wherever you want to call the edges. But that's what he runs. What A&M tries to do, what Elko tries to do, he always wants to create pressure with 4. He wants to have 5 back in the secondary. He wants 2 corners, and he wants cover 3. Garrett Nussmeier loves cover 3. And why does he love cover 3? Because he's an underneath passer. If you look at LSU, they're outside the top 100 in creating pass explosives. Kyron Lacey just has not been explosive on the outside whatsoever. They have not been able to get behind defenses, and they are not going to be able to get behind Texas A&M. But they are able to hit the middle against 2 linebackers here. Damian Sanford, Torian York, not been good in coverage grading whatsoever. And that is exactly where Nussmeier is going to target. That's why I love the prop of Aaron Anderson to go over, I believe I saw on the market, 38.5 yards. His
Taylor could have a big day too.
Yeah. His target share is going through the roof. I expect Nussmeier to be clean with his offensive line, especially from the tackle position, keeping this ferocious Texas A&M defensive line off of him. By the way, Nussmeier much better in a crowded pocket than Connor Weigman has been. Big advantage there. So another issue is just the lack of tackling by Texas A&M. If you go look at PFF, they're 65th in tackle grading and blowout. And you really, it's like, I just don't understand why Texas A&M has it some games and why they don't. I like spent way too much time figuring out why they blew out Florida and Missouri. They only had 13 combined missed tackles. Close games against, games against Arkansas and Miss State. Arkansas was close for a while. 27 missed tackles. So I can't really figure out why the missed tackle problem seems to show up. And what you have to do is look at the wide receivers of LSU and say, can they shake people after catch? There are some stats out there that say missed tackles created after catch. Aaron Anderson's one of the best in the nation. So I believe the underneath game of Garrett Nussmeier passing, I believe the protection that he has is the edge because Connor Weigman won't have that same. And Le'Veon Moss is going to be expected to carry load against a Blake Baker LSU defense that is surprising every single week. I think there are small advantage for LSU, and I think it makes a difference in the game.
A lot of familiarity between these coaches, too. It should be a fascinating game in a very hostile environment. All right, let's move on to the rundown. Cover about 7 games here. Start Texas at Vanderbilt. Diego. Texas 18.5-point favorite here. Here's Pavia as a double-digit dog. Plus 25.5 at Auburn, won by 21. Plus 12.5 at Kentucky, won by 7. Plus 23.5 versus Alabama, won by 5. Plus 17.5 at Missouri, lost by 3 in overtime. Plus 14 versus Virginia Tech, won by 7. 4-1 straight up, 1 loss in overtime. 5-0 against the spread, covering by 20 points per game on average. On the surface, this number is probably short. I price these things in with how Vandy's a service academy. I've been saying it all year. You just bet them as a double-digit dog. You fade them when they're a double-digit favorite. That's what's happened all year long. I price that in. So I'm like around 18. So like from a number perspective, I don't show a ton of value. You're going to hear a lot of people say like, well, Alabama was a 24-point favorite at Vanderbilt. And now Texas is only laying 18. Well, number one, Vanderbilt has been upgraded since they beat Alabama. They beat Kentucky. And Texas just lost and it didn't look great. Texas is still better than Alabama. And here's the thing. These lines are all wrong. The market hasn't been able to price service academies for 30 years.
Yeah. I
just told you that Pavia is 5-0 against the spread as a double-digit dog, covering by 20 points per game. His against the spread margins are 46, 20, 29, 15, and 20. So I think there's going to be more Texas money that comes in just from the numbers, guys. So I'm hoping this gets to 21. That's the number that I would like. I do worry a bit about the Vanderbilt defense, but here's the thing. Isaiah Bond is banged up. I think Quinn Ewers is banged up. And you might say, oh, Texas is going to be angry, and here they come. Well, here's the thing. This happens more times than not. Like whenever a team loses a marquee game, everyone says, oh, they're going to come out angry the next week. Top 20 teams following a loss in a top 20 matchup over the past 20 years are 137, 175, and 6 against the spread, 44%. How about as a double-digit favorite? 70, 94, and 3, 42.7%. How about as a 21-plus point favorite? 42%. Reason I say that is the next game I'll mention is Nebraska, Ohio State. Same thing. Ohio State off that game against Oregon. Did have a bye, but everyone's going to be like, oh, they're angry. Doesn't always work that way. A lot of times it's like you might be you're actually a little more flat. The market is actually a bit more inflated, pricing that in. So, yeah, it's Vanderbilt's going to limit possessions, run the clock, just follow the formula. I'm hoping for a better number, but I'll be on Vandy in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I mean, betting markets can't catch up to service academies, and success rate is completely broken because it does not take in account to fourth downs, which service academies and Vanderbilt likes to do a lot. So
Vanderbilt is a service academy.
They are
SEC service academy.
I think the thing that worries me about this, like, I mean, I get it with Vanderbilt. I think the thing that worries me is they have no pass rush whatsoever. So Quinn's going to be able to sit back there, eat a sandwich, play a game of Uno. I don't know. I mean, he's going to be able to pick out his targets no matter if Isaiah Bond is there or not. To me, this game comes down to something that we can't find in our stats. Is Texas a little pissed off that they were out physicaled by Georgia? I mean, are you
also? What does that say about Texas? Like, we didn't know
Right.
much about Texas. That's why I bet Georgia. Like, Michigan stinks, people. So that game means nothing.
Yeah.
Oklahoma stinks. Who else did they play? ULM, Colorado State. So, and Georgia's defense has not looked great all year. They did look great there. Carson Beck didn't do much, and they got blown out at home. Maybe Texas is even worse than I'm assuming, which is a part of this. I mean, yeah, Texas has advantages. They're going to be way more talented. Yours are going to have time to throw. They have better athletes. Their defensive line has huge advantages up front. But that was the case with Alabama. That was the case with Kentucky. Kentucky's
Right.
defensive line is better than Texas's. Vanderbilt won that game outright at Kentucky.
Here's what I'm looking for, Stuck. I'm not going to have a pregame bet on this. If Vanderbilt and Diego rack up 2 or 3 first downs in the first series that they have, I'm live betting Vanderbilt because I don't think this spread's going to matter. Either Texas is going to show up pissed off, blow them out, or Vanderbilt is going to do their 31.5 seconds per play service academy this shit, win first downs, chew clock, and make it close. And I think besides the live betting portion of this, I think there's a scenario that everybody needs to be aware of because by the time Stuck and I flip our microphones on next week, number may be gone. Stucky, who are you betting for the college? Who would you bet for the college football playoff if Vanderbilt wins this game or barely loses this game and LSU wins? Who should you be buying in the market for the college football playoff?
I mean, I would back LSU right now.
Texas A&M.
What?
Texas
A&M, yeah, Texas A&M.
If Texas A&M loses and Vanderbilt makes this extremely close, it's done. Texas A&M is going to win that game at home on Kyle Field, and if they lose, you're going to get a huge juicy. I know you already have a number, but I'm just saying for everybody, you're going to get a big Texas A&M juicy number. If they lose and Vanderbilt keeps this close, keep your eyes open.
Nebraska, Ohio State. Nebraska catching 25.5. Ohio State coming off of a bye after that Oregon game. You got that angry narrative here. Nebraska was embarrassed in every aspect. Do they show up here? I mean, it was bad across the board, and it looked like they quit. Ohio State lost their left tackle, Josh Simmons. He's out for the year. Right side already had questions. That's something to watch as far as like their national title contention picture because is their offensive line going to be able to hold up? How does that end up playing out? Rule is 22-10 against the spread as a dog of more than a touchdown. 14-6 when more than 10, 10-4 when more than 14, tends to play conservative. Like Ohio State has Penn State on deck. I don't know how much they want to show if they get a big lead.
Exactly.
I don't know. I think this number is a bit too high. It's kind of like Nebraska.
it's way too high, right? The number should be, I mean, I make it 19. I believe SP Plus is at 22, whatever. Their
Yeah, I'm
numbers
at
are,
like 20,
it's way,
22.3, I think.
it's way too high, but the question has to be asked, what has Nebraska done to earn your trust on the road when Ohio State could simply line up with Trevion Henderson and Quinshon
Nebraska's
Judkins?
run D's been so bad. They're getting pushed
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. And offensive finishing drives for Nebraska, 119th. Like, even if they get into scoring
Special
position,
teams a disaster too.
special teams 127th. What has Nebraska done to earn your trust with your money that you earned all week on the road against Ohio State? Absolutely nothing. Now, I'm not saying go out and buy Ohio State. Absolutely nothing to earn. There's just no bet here. There's nothing for Nebraska.
I might put a small bet on Nebraska.
By the
from
way,
a
is Matt
numbers
Rule
perspective.
looking around? Is Matt Rule looking around?
I don't know. His comments were kind of curious this week in
Yeah.
his pressers.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. Florida State at Miami. Florida State a 21-point favorite here. Oof. What was this line before the year? Pick.
You told me on Monday we never have to talk about these guys again.
Well, the reason I want to talk about it is, wait, is it sitting at 20 and a half right now? Yeah, 21. Miami doesn't have many tough games on their schedule. So like Cam Ward Heisman, you want to get some stats here.
Right.
Also, I mean, Florida State has been on, they're bad. It's a bad football team, just like Michigan. It's a new world of college football. Sometimes teams that are really good do a complete 180 and you got to downgrade them like 17, 20 points. It's crazy to say out loud, but it's just the way that it works now. Here's the thing. Miami, who knows who's going to be under center? They might be rotating quarterbacks. Florida State has been unlucky with turnovers. Like eventually they're going to get some turnovers. They're not going to drop every pass. They're also maybe not. I mean, maybe they're just going to continue turning over because their quarterbacks are terrible. But Miami probably wants to run this up, right? Last year, Florida State beat them. Cristobal's first year, Florida State beat them 44-3 or 45-3. And what did they do in that game? Norvell ran it up, ran in for a touchdown late. So you want to get Ward stats, shove it to Florida State. And is really good at never taking knees. Mario Cristobal. I don't think he has to worry about not taking a knee to blow this game. I actually lean Miami. I can't get to this number. Like, let me see how much I've downgraded. I'll tell you right now. I have downgraded.
Oh God, I can look too.
Let's see.
All right, I'll do this too. This ought to be a fun little exercise.
Miami. I mean, it's hard to know how much to downgrade these teams. What do I project this at? Oh, never mind. I can get to this number. I was looking at my neutral. I'm 22. So I lean Miami. Florida State, I've downgraded.
Holy cow.
Let's see. Florida
I've got mine. How much have you downgraded them?
16 and a half points.
14 points for me.
16 and a half. I'm at 22 in this game. Let me see if that's the most I've downgraded a team. Let's look up Michigan. Michigan. I've only downgraded 14 and a half. So yeah, Florida State is the most. Crazy. I'm at 22. Like actually 22.6. So I would lean Miami here, and I think they want to run it up. Any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, why there's not going to be knees, right? I mean, there's not going to be knees because there's always going to be a recruiting battle inside this state. Well, look at that. App State. App State is my biggest dive this year, 18 and a half points. Next, Florida State minus 14 and a half points. All right. Back on task.
App State is 18 and a half. What do
I've taken 18 and a half points off their power rating.
I haven't been that aggressive yet because like they dealt with and you were really high on App State. You were much higher on App State than me.
I was.
You had more to come down. App State had to deal with like the flooding and all that, so
Yeah.
like I was kind of giving them a pass for some, but anyway, good.
Yeah. So no one's taking knees in this game because no matter what, no matter how bad the records are, there's still a recruiting battle in this state, a monster recruiting battle. These two teams are going after the same guys, whether it's the portal or whether it's high school kids, they're going after them when they're in seventh grade. So this is a really big game from that aspect. I think the one thing, if I had to pick, because I don't have really a side on the game, I make it like what, 21 and a half, and the total, damn man, I make the total 55.8 and the total on the board is 54 and a half. So as much as I'd like to get into the over on the narrative that these two teams aren't going to quit, there's one big problem I have with Florida State, and that the fact is that they're 70th in defensive havoc. How do you beat Cam Ward? Defensive havoc. How do you stop them? Defensive havoc. It's just they're not going to get behind the line of scrimmage. They're not going to swat stuff down. Florida State's just really kind of pathetic. They're outside the top 100 and defensive quality drives, and Miami is number one in getting that ball into scoring position from a methodical quality drive perspective. I think if there's something that could cover this game for Florida State, maybe something hidden from everybody else's stats. Florida State is number one in the nation in SP plus special teams. Miami's no slack. I mean, they're not slacking. They're 28th, but Florida State number one in special teams could be a punt return, could be a kick return, could be a blocked punt, could be something like that that gets you a nice little backdoor when they're down by 28.
Uh, SMU Duke, I actually might look at the under here.
That's
The
what I got.
pace is going to be the pace is going to be high.
Yep.
But you got to hit pass explosives versus SMU. Duke can't. You got to hit run explosives versus Duke. SMU can't.
Right.
Also, they lost. Might hurt your SMU futures. They lost RJ Maryland for the
Yeah.
season. It's a big loss.
Mhm.
Their star tight end. And maybe Duke's secondary isn't as good as their numbers, but they haven't really played anybody. But a lot of familiarity between these head coaches too, which I think lends itself to an under in this particular case. You agree there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was on the under all the way. RJ Maryland getting hurt. He was the top target on the team. He's a tight end, the next tight end on the on the list of targets of the team. Matthew Hibner. He has 7 targets on the season. But if you look at the offense and what Kevin Jennings throws to, it is a slot-driven offense. The next highest targets is wide receiver Jake Bailey. He has as many appearances in the slot as RJ Maryland. So the question is, who's going to fill that other slot spot? And can this SMU offense be as dynamic as it was when they had RJ Maryland? SMU's biggest advantage in this game come in the rushing attack against the Duke defense. SMU can still run the ball even with RJ Maryland out. Since week 4 against TCU, Rashard Smith has been just a workhorse running back, over 4 yards after first contact. He's created 24 missed tackles. And the Duke offense is just going to have all kinds of problems with the exception of pass blocking. The offense has just been horrific, near dead last in all rushing metrics, near dead last and creating a methodical drive. There's just too many disadvantages. And by the way, they're pretty terrible in red zone attempts. I like the under here for the simple fact that I think SMU is going to have to figure out their new world without RJ Maryland. I think there could be a little bit more rushing attempts. And the last thing on RJ Maryland, he was the only receiver, the only target on this SMU offense that was over 2 yards per route run. So I think that explosive number that we've seen for SMU, which right now is sitting at 18th in pass EPA, I think you're going to see a little bit of a downgrade on that without Maryland because he was the only one over 2 yards per route run. So yeah, under with you.
I like Kansas in the Sunflower Showdown, catching double digits. Kansas, one of the unluckiest teams in the country, just lost like 5 straight one-possession games, blew a bunch of leads, had bad turnovers. Kansas State, still not fully sold on. Yeah, they rolled West Virginia. West Virginia had a ton of injuries and turnovers in that game. They rolled Oklahoma State, who looked like they had quit. They beat Arizona. That has not aged well. I mean, like I haven't really been impressed with their schedule. Yeah, they won at Colorado by 3 in a comeback effort, but I think Kansas's game here to keep up. I think Kansas State's gonna have success on the ground, but I trust Leopold. Kansas State has been really, really good at home under Kleiman as a favorite, which is scary. But I think this number's too high.
Yeah, I gotta I can't go against you on that. I do like Kansas State, but I can't go against you because I have a game of the year at 6.5. So I, got some value in that. Just hope that cashes. If I was to play devil's advocate, I would say, Kansas State is going to be able to stop the Jayhawks from running the ball. Jayhawks are going to have to go to the air because Kansas State has no pass rush, 114th in pass rush. And it's good news if Kansas gets into scoring position. They're actually number 1 in offensive finishing drive. So they are good there. The defense, though, is going to be the problem. If Kansas is going to cover this game, they have got to do better on the ground against Kansas State, running power and counter and all that stuff that Kleiman likes to run. 122nd in defensive line yards. That is not going to get it done in this trench against Kansas State. Kansas State also pretty big in rush EPA. That's something Kansas is going to have to control, but that's why the point spread is in the double digits. So we'll see. I'm just going to sit back with my game of the year 6.5 and another sunflower showdown that Kansas State generally dominates, but there are a few advantages here for Kansas in the numbers.
Yeah, Daniels is playing better too. He was a disaster early, but he's taking care of the ball now.
He must be healthy.
Yeah. Bowling Green against Toledo. I like the Falcons. I think they're the best team in the MAC. I still have them power rated that way. I mean, last week, Toledo beat Northern Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Battle of backup quarterbacks. Northern Illinois scored 6 points. They ran 90 plays and had 400 yards of offense with a backup quarterback. They went 2 of 8 on fourth down. Bazelak looked fine and healthy last week. Look at this Bowling Green's resume. They're 3 of their losses by 6 at Texas A&M, college football playoff team potentially, by 7 at Penn State, and by 3 against Old Dominion when they blew that late lead. I mean, this team is, I think, legit. They've dealt with some injuries. They're now healthier. Tucker Gleason, I don't really care if he plays or doesn't, but he's questionable for Toledo. And Toledo can't run the ball. Literally an impoverished run game. So it's all up to Gleason. They do have good weapons, but BG with Aludikin and company, they're 3rd in the country in pass success rate. That secondary is great. Gleason will make some mistakes. Still not fully sold on the Toledo defense. I like Bowling Green on the road in the Glass Bowl.
Yeah, put it on the board. Bowling Green, strength of schedule, 40th, Toledo 118th. So when you look at Toledo's numbers and you see things that are red, you're thinking, holy cow, you've played a really soft schedule and you're really bad at, well, let's start. Pass blocking. They're not going to be able to protect whatsoever. They can't run the ball. They're 115th in rushing success rate. And oh, by the way, sometimes you can break off pass explosives. That's not going to work against Bowling Green, 12th nationally in defensive pass EPA. I have a 7-1 ticket on Bowling Green to win the MAC. If you listen to the new BCS the other day, I'm about to throw a Buffalo one in there. I think there's still an 11-1 out there, but this is it for Toledo. And I know they're the favorite in this game, but if you believe in your 7-1 ticket, or if you don't have one, we've got to have this game.
Yep. Huge game for the MAC. One final one. I like Cincy against Colorado. I think this line's too high now. Colorado taking money. I mean, Colorado's playing a lot better. The defense is playing a lot better, but look, Arizona had a bunch of injuries. They lost to Kansas State, who even Avery Johnson got banged up in the game. They beat UCF when UCF was not using their ideal quarterback. They beat Baylor at home in overtime. Like, has it really been that impressive? Getting blown out by Nebraska, that doesn't look great now. Yeah. You play Colorado State when they were banged up. I think this is the peak of the market for, and Cincinnati just doesn't get enough respect. This is a team that's a couple plays away from being undefeated. And I can certainly tell you this line wouldn't be 5.5 right now. I mean, Cincinnati lost to Texas Tech by 3 on the road in a game where all their running backs got hurt. Yeah. They lost by 1 to Pitt in a ridiculously unlucky game where they blew the lead late. So 4th down delay a game. This line's too high.
It is too high. Max. Yeah, and it can happen. There's things with Colorado that are starting to poke out. Like it's not hard to figure out what they're going to do offensively, and that makes it easier for defensive coordinators to game plan around this. Cincinnati's really good at havoc. They're top 10 nationally in defensive finishing drives. Colorado may be able to get down the field with Shedeur throwing the ball, although the pass defense is the best part of the Bearcats. There are things that just plague this offense. Colorado offense is 122nd and offensive momentum killer. Penalties, missed field goals, just taking themselves out of drives is just a staple of this Colorado offense. Defensively, I think they can be taken advantage too. They still don't have a pass rush. So you can put it on I'm so hesitant because these Satterfield teams just seem to beat themselves and shoot themselves in the foot, but it hasn't been happening this year. So you can put it on the board. I'm going to join you.
Yeah, I'm going to wait right now. It's at 5.5 in a dead range. I'm going to see where this goes. Colorado public team. But yeah. I'll be on.
That's true. Yeah.
I'll be on Cincy at some point before game time. All right, it's time. It's time for some trash. All right, let's start. I'm going to start just a quick one sentence with your team. I'm in on them. Playing a lot better after the bye. Rice catching way too many at UConn. I don't. This line should again like Colorado. This line should be like a field goal. Playing much better right now. Who is UConn to be? I mean, UConn's getting way too much respect in the market. What were they? All that money they took against Temple, they should have lost at Temple at home. Give me the Owls.
I mean, I make this game. What is this line? I make this game much shorter. I make this game 4.
I make it 3.2. I'm just waiting to see if I can get a 7.
Like, am I reading that another famous power rating system makes this 14? What the hell is this line? All right, put me down.
Who makes it 14?
SP Plus.
Really?
I watched the entire UConn Wake game. Them sons of bitches, Huskies, man. I cannot believe they let Wake win that game. Okay, so Rice can actually defend the rush a little bit. They have a better strength of schedule. Let's go with the Owls. You know what? Let's get some more Owl tweets out there since shout out to Sickos Committee, which doesn't follow us or acknowledge gambling Twitter, using some rogue Owl GIF whenever Kennesaw State. Bro, everybody out there in gambling Twitter knows the Owl GIF is the turning head. You got to use it, and we're going to use it on Rice when they cover.
Man, it's 14. I'm actually, I'm right around 4 too. I just checked. 4.5 actually. 4.3.
Yeah, we're there.
So yeah, I'm just waiting to see if I can get a 7.
Is that where it's going?
I don't know. It looks like it might start ticking down now, but I'm just waiting. Monitoring. Next up, let's go. Now we're gonna get real ugly. Got some vintage trash teams in here. Akron. Akron off a bye here. They're playing much better. And look, they needed the bye. They had a brutal non-conference schedule. They were at South Carolina, at Rutgers, at Ohio State. Their offense has really been rolling since they kind of started playing teams in their own weight class. And I mean, this Akron defense, I think, is underrated in the MAC. EMU has played nobody. Strength of schedule, 147th if you include FCS teams. They've won a ton of close games. They beat Central Michigan last week. It was down to their third-string quarterback when they were down 18 in the fourth quarter. Their other wins came against Kent State, St. Francis, Jacksonville State by 3 in double overtime, and UMass. I mean, again, this Eastern Michigan team is doing. You got to give credit to Chris Creighton, but Akron, a much tougher schedule, playing much better here. And yeah, I mean, they're 0-3 in the MAC, but they've been within one possession in the fourth quarter in all their games, despite a pretty difficult start to league play. And yeah, I like the Zips here.
Can you believe one of the first bets I made on Sunday was Akron +5? So I
put it on the board.
To me, okay. So we talked about this. Put it on the board. To me, we talked about this on the new BCS. Western Michigan had a monster fraud box score, right? Eastern. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. So
against Akron, Akron put up 500 yards.
Right. Akron put up 500 yards, and it just caught my eye. I was like, I'm betting this team. And then when I saw it was Eastern Michigan, they're box score frauds themselves. Go check out the Central Michigan and the Kent. Both of those teams had higher overall yards per play. Eastern Michigan.
And both were playing for third-string quarterbacks.
Eastern Michigan +9 in turnovers over the last 3 games. You are living on borrowed time, my friends. Let's go Akron.
Zips outright. Well, you mentioned Kent State. I like Kent State +17.5 against Western Michigan. Western Michigan, you want to talk about a team living on borrowed time. Here are their 3 wins. They beat Ball State 45-42, Akron, and Buffalo last week. By the way, Akron had a -4 turnover margin in that game. So they had 3 close wins against teams that aren't, Buffalo, Ball State, and Akron. That's not the hardest MAC start to the schedule. In those games, they allowed those 3 offenses to gain 551, 501, and 397. They've been outgained in their 3 MAC wins by 112 yards, but they benefited from a +6 turnover margin. Western Michigan's offense is great. Offensive line is great. They're healthy now. They're going to move the ball here. But Kent State can keep up. Western Michigan's defense is legit horrendous. So there's many paths for Kent State who they've shown juice. They've gotten to 30 plus against Eastern Michigan and Ball State. They can get in the back door here too. This is also just a bad spot for Western Michigan. They got that thrilling win. They got BG and NIU coming up. Sleepy spot. I make this around 15 and a half. And again, we're fading two MAC favorites at home. MAC favorites at home in league play over the past 10 seasons, 42% against the spread. Just not, the home field is always overinflated. So give me Kent State plus 17 and a half at Western Michigan. That's a hold your nose special.
Listen, if Kennesaw State can dominate Liberty, anything can happen, right? Shout out to my wife who called them Crenshaw State. When does Crenshaw State come on tonight? I was like, that's not a team. I'm not going to join you. There's one big advantage here. Kent State is second in pass EPA. But you have to look at how that is calculated, but you can calculate Western Michigan's. They're almost dead last in allowing passing EPA, but that is Kent State's only way
McCray, baby, to
get some numbers on the board. But I don't want you to put it on the board. I'm not going to join you. I will do Akron with you. I can't digest Akron. And Rice. I can't digest Kent State with you. So good luck in your trash. I'll take 2 of the 3.
All right, that's your trash. Kent State, Akron, and Rice. Trash is 7-3 on the year. For me, 1-0 for Collin with Rice. Rice makes it back to the trash board. All right, let's go nowhere fast. San Diego State back in action, hosting Washington State. Gross.
You know what we're doing here. Come on.
Hold on, I'm just pulling up updated line. San Diego State, 14.5 point dog, 57.5 is the total.
Yeah.
Where are you going?
Yeah, we're going to take the over in this game. We're absolutely going to take the over in this game. There will be no resistance to John Mateer for Wazoo. San Diego State is 130th in defensive line yards. Mateer is going to run wild. Wazoo is top 10 in rushing EPA. San Diego State's defense, 115th in allowing rush explosives. And that's with a strength of schedule that's 124th. What is stopping Washington State from trotting down the field? I have no clue. Both of these teams extremely fast, 24.5 seconds per play. And so your question with this over is at 57.5, can San Diego State contribute? Yes, actually they can. They're top 30 in both rush and pass EPA. This is not, I think I've said this before, this is not a successful San Diego State offense. They do not move the chains. They just create explosive chunk plays. Wazoo's near dead last in allowing rush explosives. There's going to be some long touchdowns here. Just get your CBS Sports turned on, get some popcorn, and we're going over 57.5 here.
All right. Over in San Diego State, Wazoo. Collin on Arkansas. Arkansas, after disappointing effort against LSU, will travel down to Cowbell country to take on Mississippi State. This line's down to 6.5. I mentioned to you earlier in the week, I was like, I think this line's too high. I should have taken a 7.5.
I agree.
The one thing that I'm worried about is, I'll say that again. The one thing I'm worried about is just like Mississippi State's been a covering machine of late. They've been better overall, trending in the right direction with their freshman quarterback. But they've played Texas A&M, and Georgia. It's a long season for them. Is it just like the question is does Arkansas show up? So I'd lean Mississippi State at 7 or above. What do you see here?
I agree with you. I don't want to. The attitude has shifted a little bit in the locker room. This is a game Arkansas absolutely has to have if you look at the remainder of the schedule, because the only other winnable game I believe on the schedule is La Tech, and they have to have that to get to bowl season. So for you, my friend, this is a big game for you if Mississippi State pulls this off, because I don't think they can win anything else on their schedule but La Tech.
Get ready to learn neck brace, buddy.
Mississippi State they're putting up numbers in the rushing analytics against some of the toughest defenses they face against Georgia. There's other ones out there. Mississippi State's doing things I did not expect under Jeff Levy's offense. So I think this is a battle. Take the points, and I'm just going to cross my fingers that Arkansas. I would like to go to an Arkansas bowl game, but Hogs have to have this win, or Pittman's. We're right back up there in the coaching hot seat.
And you're right back to wearing a neck brace. All right. Before we get out of here, let's go 3 and out. Welcome to our new BBOC channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe and like button if this is your first time joining us, or listening to our podcast, we do the 3 and Out portion of our podcast, which will be out later tonight, wherever you listen to podcasts, breaking down the entire slate. We do the 3 and Out portion, which is the finale, live, 6 p.m. Eastern, every Thursday night. We'll cover our favorite favorites, underdog moneyline parlay, our favorite bets on fourth down, and we'll kick things off with some Friday night lights on first down, as we always do. So let's get right into it with some Friday night lights. Let's start with the big one, Collin. Boise State traveling to UNLV, the same place that they went down to and rolled the Rebels in the Mountain West Championship last season during their late season surge. Boise State was a 2.5-point favorite, got up to 3.5, which is where it's sitting right now. I think this is a good spot just on the surface for Boise State, coming off a bye, 2 weeks to prepare for this huge game, which will have college football and Mountain West implications, should say college football playoff and Mountain West championship implications. Meanwhile, UNLV, defense on the field for 90, plays in an overtime game against Syracuse. Go to altitude against Utah State, defense on the field for 90-plus plays. Go to Corvallis. That game goes right down to the final play of the game. Could there be some fatigue here? Could that lead to more Ashton Jeanty broken tackles, which he just racks up yards after contact on a weekly basis, better than really any running back we've seen in 20-plus years so far to date. The Boise State defense does have some vulnerabilities on the back end, but one thing they do well is get after the quarterback. I think that could end up being the difference here. Boise State with Ashton Jeanty going to get their yards, going to be in much more manageable third down situations, whereas UNLV, are they going to have just too many negative plays with Malik Williams against that Boise State defensive front, which is really getting after the quarterback? And then they're going to have more, tougher third down situations, known passing downs. The other thing to note here, UNLV, extremely reliant, and it's part of the Barry Odom defense, but they have been causing havoc and turnovers as much as any team in the country, even getting punt blocks and things of that nature. Because Boise State really takes care of the football. Who will win the turnover battle probably go a long way in determining this one as well. Can UNLV keep that pace up of taking the ball away, or will Boise State continue to not give it away? What are your thoughts here?
The money that has been on Boise State is real. I hit the opener on the money line. There was -125s, -130s out there. The number took off at 2.5. 3, as you and I are recording this, 3.5. I would still buy it. I make this game Boise -4, and I go back to the Mountain West Championship game in Allegiant last year, and Boise won that game 44-20. I think it's worth noting there were 48 points scored in the first half of that game. They just came out blazing with points on both sides. Adjustments were made, and Boise's coaching staff really won that game. So I have no problem with Spencer Danielson. And yes, even Eric Shenander, who I have not liked backing at all the days back to Nebraska, that defense getting prepared for the go-go of Brendan Marion there. Now they're going to face Malik Williams here. And you have to ask, can he be the difference maker? Because he does have that deep passing element that can get into the Boise secondary. But I keep going back to Boise State's schedule this year. They've already played Washington State. And you say, well, can they stop Hodge from running around all over the place? My answer is yes, because John Mateer, a similar style quarterback, leads Washington State in rushing, a heavy, deep passer. He was shut down. He had 20 rushes for just 28 yards. I'm sure there's some sack yardage in there. I think there were 8 sacks in the game. They got to him, took that away from him. 26 of 37 passing, and he had 327 yards. But from a rushing perspective, that was completely taken away from him. So I see the exact same thing here. I think Hodge is going to get that passing game going. Boise's 122nd in tackling. You go back to that Georgia Southern game. It was just, Boise defenders bouncing off Georgia Southern runners all the time. So there's going to be UNLV with their moments where they're going to create chunk plays and Boise can't tackle. But at the same time, Boise's going to have that havoc going and be able to pull Hodge down which is why you saw come through the Action app earlier today. Hodge was listed at 60.5 rushing yards. I mean, in college, sacks count against that, and I think that's going to be a big component. So I did go the under on that. You also have to think about the pressure it's going to be on Hodge. His adjusted completion rate dips from 80 to 58% when he gets pressure in his face. Yeah, he's not been very good. And you have to wonder how many explosives there's going to be for UNLV, especially if there's a pressured pocket. The UNL defense has improved, but their biggest problem against this Boise State offense, like, are they going to stop Ashton Jeanty? No. They're 113th in defensive finishing drives. They're terrible in defensive stuff rate. They're 82nd in other rushing metrics. Jeanty touchdowns, I'm sure they're, priced pretty high. But I mean, if you could get some sort of like 1.5, 2.5 over, maybe worth some couch change to throw on that. But I don't see any resistance to offensive quality drives and finishing drives. I'm expecting plenty of points here. I just expect a ton more from UNLV, but be careful with this number. 65 is the biggest key in this range. We're hovering around 64.5. Don't know if there's going to be a push. I would be much more comfortable with the first half over because of last year's script where they just took haymakers at each other. Spencer Danielson for Boise State made adjustments on the defensive side, and Ricky White never saw the ball in the second half. So I love my Boise ticket. I would still take it at 3.5. I would consider a first half over and take a peek at those Hodge rushing yards, because one of the national books already took it down to 54.5 after I hit it a couple hours ago. So I'm not sure where I'd stop hitting it, but Hodge is going to get sacked here.
Yeah, sack yardage obviously counts against rushing yardage, and Boise State's been as good as any defense in the country at racking those up. Let's move on to some ACC action between Boston College and Louisville. Louisville, 7.5 point favorite. I like BC here. Hopefully you get the good Tommy gun at quarterback, but this is more of a fade of Louisville in the spot. Coming off that just gut-wrenching loss to Miami, got a couple calls that didn't go their way. Third loss of the season. What does that mean? Season's pretty much over. They had, college football playoff, ACC championship aspirations, pretty much out the window now. Traveling up to BC on a short week in a game sandwiched between Miami and Clemson. And just, so where is this Louisville team at mentally? I don't know if it's signal or just noise, but, Collin Lacey, one of their big transfer additions at wide receiver, return man, he is opting out for the rest of the season. So maybe that's just a signal of where this team is at mentally.
Yep.
I took the home dog here. Any thoughts?
I was surprised to see the number go from 6.5 up to 7.5 with the announcement of that of Collin Lacey. That is a monster piece of that offense. The reason I've hesitated, because we talked about this on the new BCS about Boston College being the side. When I looked at 6.5, I was like, I do make it 9, and I'm wondering why it's trickling up. I will be on BC with you. I just think that there's a chance that we get through a couple of these numbers that don't, these middling numbers that don't mean anything. So we could maybe touch 8. I think I would just wait out for the best possible number. And you mentioned, like, season's over, they just had a close loss. That's what all the losses have been. 3 of their last 4 games have been losses by a single TD, by single possession. Notre Dame, SMU, Miami. Now you've got your best player on offense.
Virginia was right down to the wire.
Yeah, and boy, Virginia, we got to talk about on some fine time on another pod. They're showing up somehow. And they do have a common opponent. These two teams, Boston College and Louisville, do have a common opponent. The problem with BC is they had 3 turnovers. They did nudge ahead in overall yards per play. Louisville just could not get Virginia off the field. 9 for 21 in third and fourth down attempts by Virginia. And Boston College is 19th in the country in third down conversion. So I'm with you here. I am with you on Boston College. I'm just a little hesitant. Like, where is it? There's been some steam stock Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're seeing steam go in the wrong direction, and then the game plays out another way. So I'm resided to setting my line watcher up and our Action Labs tools, seeing if this thing goes back to a flat 7. If it does, I'm going to join you. Might go to 8, but I'm going to jump in on Boston College with you.
All right, going to some late night action out on the West Coast, where the World Series will also kick off. We have Rutgers traveling across the country on a short week to take on USC. USC 13.5 point favorite. Where is Rutgers at mentally? I don't know. Where's USC at? I mean, USC's coming across the country too on a short week for what it's worth. They've blown back-to-back 14-point leads, one to Penn State, and then last week against Maryland, got a field goal block that would have essentially sealed that game. Look, Rutgers has been a mess of late. They've had injuries on the defensive end. I mean, their linebackers that's been the problem on their defense. I mean, their linebackers have been so bad. They missed Torrey, who's hurt. Powell, I don't think is still 100%. They lost Jennings to the NFL, and their linebackers just are out of position. Last week, they didn't have their edge rushers, two of their edge rushers, Bailey and Lewis. What did they try to do instead? They just tried to blitz UCLA just incessantly. It wasn't working. Their linebackers were just getting picked on. UCLA was just throwing to wide. The running back was just wide open in the flat all game. I mean, it was bad, and there was no adjustments made. I don't know what this Rutgers defense is doing of late. The way to attack this USC defense is, they're doing a good job of preventing explosive passing plays. You want to attack them. You can still attack them through the air, though, just with an efficient passing attack. Do you trust Rutgers to do that with the Greek water pistol? I'm not sure. This is a tough game for me to handicap. I'm just not sure where either of these teams are at mentally. But if the Rutgers defense continues trending the way it does and they're not making adjustments, they're not doing these simple things with their linebackers, Miller Moss and Lincoln Riley should have a field day. Maybe a sneaky over. USC dealing with the injuries of their own on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Rutgers not a team I generally like to bet overs on, but what are you seeing here?
Yeah, you definitely don't. I think there has to be more of a desperation, and the team that shows up that plays harder here, I believe, is going to be USC, because if you look at their remaining 3 wins here, we're trying to get to bowl season here, and our remaining schedule has a pick 'em against Washington, a short dog against Notre Dame, 2 favorite spots against UCLA and Nebraska. Like, you've got to get this win. This win is critical if you want to make the postseason and get people off your back if you're Lincoln Riley. And there are a lot of problems with this USC team that, the pass rush, mid FBS success against the rush, 95th in defensive stuff rate. And their coverage grading is top 25. But the cap against Rutgers is really against the rush. And you have to look at the shared data point that these two teams have. Rutgers was absolutely dominated by Wisconsin. You look at USC, they won by 17. They limited Wisconsin, and passing downs really kind of took them out of the game with what they were able to do on 3rd and 4th down from a defensive perspective. And the success rate dictates that the Trojans could beat Rutgers at their own game by owning the time of possession, which is crazy to think of, because that's how Rutgers wins games. They want to go time of possession. They want to go vanilla playbook, and they just want to kind of let you bleed out, hang upside down and bleed out. USC's 20th with the rush. They're 24th in the pass. From a success rate perspective, I expect them to own the clock. I expect them to move the chains, and I expect them to be better in the first half, just based on what has happened over the last couple of weeks. USC up 21-7 on Maryland last week, up 20-6 on Penn State a couple of weeks ago at halftime. So I'm on the USC side. The number is it's out of control. Like, it's too high. I think it should be 11. I think 14 is a little high, but USC has played very well in the first half. And not only that, Rutgers is kicking off at 11 p.m. Like, like, how do you prepare for that? Like, your kids are showing up to practice like after dinner this week. I don't know how you get them prepared for that, but I like USC in the first half here based upon what they did to Maryland and Penn State a couple weeks before.
What time does that game kick?
11 Eastern, right?
Yeah, so it'll be 8 o'clock their time.
8 o'clock USC time.
11 Eastern. Or it'd be 11 o'clock. Yeah. 8 o'clock. Yeah, 11 o'clock in their like bedtime for them.
Like,
for
when
the
do you
Rutgers
eat?
body clock.
When do you eat if you're Rutgers?
Yeah, no, that they're could mess with their rhythm a bit. There's been some studies done in that aspect that there's definitely an impact. But decent Friday night slate. Decent Friday night slate. Headliner certainly is Boise State UNLV. Should be a fun game. Good. I think it's a good live betting game as well. It should be some back and forth. Should be some points. And the winner of that game probably in the driver's seat for the Group of 5 college football playoff berth. UNLV already with a couple Power 5 wins. We've seen Boise State go toe-to-toe with Oregon in Eugene. So looking forward to this version of Friday Night Lights. All right, let's move on to second down, our favorite overdog, aka our favorite. I'll kick things off. I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks. I would try to wait for buy a cheap 21. I think that's pretty important here. Could be a backdoor. Oregon also is, kind of taking their foot off the gas in second halves, which does concern me a bit. But two of the games were on the road in sleepy environments. The other one was the week before Ohio State, which makes some sense here. This is, a game against a ranked opponent at home. I think they might be a little bit more incentivized to, keep pushing. And this Illinois defense might wear down, and I don't think they can stop the run. Look, Illinois, you might look at this number and say, this is crazy. Why are they, this ranked Illinois team, why are they catching 3 touchdowns? Well, I mean, number one, I played Penn State -17 against Illinois a couple weeks back, closed 18. I mean, they should have won that game by 35. Penn State doesn't miss a couple of field goals. They don't get a 4th down. Illinois had a 1 opening drive touchdown, and they did nothing the rest of the game, 140 total yards. From a success rate perspective, it was the biggest gap of any game that week. Illinois was dominated in that game. And that's against a Penn State offense that just hasn't shown any ability to generate explosive plays. They still lost that game by 2 touchdowns. They've been very fortunate in the turnover department. Even go back to last week against Michigan. By the way, Michigan steamed out to a 6-point favorite at Illinois. 6-point favorite at Illinois. I have Oregon as like a 23-point favorite on a neutral field against Michigan. Michigan was laying 6. Now, I didn't agree with that move. And you might say, oh, well, Illinois won. Very misleading final. I mean, Michigan outgained them. They had 3 turnovers, missed a field goal. You just look at it, again, from a success rate perspective. Yeah, I don't know how you let that Michigan offense be that successful. The defensive line for Illinois is bad. They get pushed around. They generate no havoc. I don't see how they stop Jordan James. This Oregon team is peaking. Like early in the season, their offensive line had some issues. Dylan Gabriel was adjusting to this new scheme. That's all out the window. Offensive line's playing well. James has gotten going. The receivers have found their roles. Gabriel's has, really adjusted to this new scheme. So offense firing on all cylinders. On the defensive side of the ball, secondary playing very well. Just the communication on the back end has been superb all season. Little vulnerable against the run. Illinois can't run the ball. Offensive line is terrible. And everyone is talking about Luke Altmaier and how, great he's been. And listen, Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, 2 great receivers. Altmaier, 15 touchdowns, 1 interception. His 9 big-time throws, 9 turnover-worthy plays. Last year, he had 9 turnover-worthy plays and 10 interceptions. The turnovers are coming. The turnover regression is coming. Illinois currently +7 turnover margin. I mean, and look back at their wins. Like Michigan is horrendous. Kansas hasn't aged as well. And Nebraska hasn't aged as well. You mentioned common opponent before. Common opponent here, Purdue. Illinois was lucky to beat Purdue at home 50-49. Oregon went to Purdue on a short week after upsetting Ohio State and won 35-0. I think this is an Oregon truck. Give me the Ducks. Go Ducks. By the way, since 2005, in matchups between ranked teams, favorites of 14 or more, 76, 53, and 1 against the spread, 59%, covering by about 4 points per game. When favored by at least 3 touchdowns, 16 and 6 against the spread, 73%. I think Oregon can do whatever they want on offense. They're going to dominate the line of scrimmage. Illinois can't stop the run. They're going to have to bring guys up. It's going to set up Gabriel to attack through the air. And Illinois can't really run the ball now down Fagan. I like the Ducks here.
I like that play. I mean, Luke Altmaier has not had contested catches with Zachary Franklin and Pat Bryant. That is about to change with this Oregon secondary, which is crazy good. I'm going to move over to the SEC. I can't even begin to figure out how Oklahoma is going to score any points. So let's go with Ole Miss as my overdog. And listen, this Oklahoma offense, breaking news, by the way, Deion Burks is questionable. This Oklahoma offense has just been bad from every single direction. no success rate in passing or rushing, line yards bottom 10, near dead last in big play rate, 130th in creating a quality drive. They can't even get into scoring position. And it doesn't matter who the quarterback is, which, oh, by the way, it's Jackson Arnold, because they decided to burn his red shirt for no reason whatsoever. One of every 5 passes for Oklahoma this season has been a contested catch. And that's going to targets that didn't even expect to play this year because they've had so many injuries at the wide receiver position. That's not going to work against an Ole Miss team that is not just number 1 defensively in havoc in the entire nation. They're also number 1 in the nation in PBUs. No one has swatted more balls down out of the air than Ole Miss. This is the top ranked havoc defense for the Rebels against an OU offense that is near dead last in havoc allowed. It's going to be a real problem. The Sooners are so bad on offense, they allow an average of 8 tackles for loss per game.
Their offensive line's going to get eaten up here.
They fumbled the ball 14 times. It's nearly the highest in all of FBS. But this is not just a pure analytics play. There is something else going on with this Oklahoma team that I think everybody should be paying attention to. Offensive coordinator Seth Luttrell gets fired. Everybody knows that by now. And Kevin Johns, who was kind of monitoring the quarterbacks, is going to take over the play calling. So Kevin Johns will be up in the press box. But what people don't realize is that co-offensive coordinator Joe John Finley has been the guy on the sideline to organize the units, to go through the tablets, to talk to the players about the changes and the adjustments and what's going on. He's really the one central focus guy that all the players on offense have looked to for substitutions, for personnel information. Joe John Finley is leaving the sideline and they're putting him up in the booth. They're going to put him right next to Kevin Johns, some sort of tutoring role to learn how to call plays out of a new playbook that Oklahoma is going to have. You're going to leave these players, this offense that's in complete disarray. You're going to leave them on the sidelines with no leadership from a coaching perspective to get them in the right formations and the right setup and the right players on the field. Disaster. There's going to be penalties against OU just for delay of game, just for personnel on the field. Like, I think it's a terrible decision to take that guy off the sidelines and put him up in the booth next to Kevin Johns, but I'm not on the coaching staff of Oklahoma. So we're going to take Ole Miss. The numbers where it should be, but there's just too many factors here that say Oklahoma's offense is even in more severe trouble here.
All right, let's move on to oh, by the way, are we putting either Oregon or BC on the agree tab or not yet?
The thing is, we need the BC number, right? Like
Oregon, you need 20. You need it to be 21.
Yeah, I would.
Okay, we'll leave them off for now. All right, let's move on to third down. Our favorite moneyline underdogs for our underdog moneyline parlay. Hit 2 straight. Came crashing down last week, went 0-2. Let's get back on track here. I'll kick things off. I'm going to go with Michigan State. I like them against the spread as well. I can't believe this. Before the year, I had this spread around 20. I now have Michigan as an under a 3-point favorite. I have Michigan State power rated slightly higher than Michigan. I just don't know how many more weeks we need to see. We need to see Michigan stinks, people. I don't know how many more times I have to say it. I mean, they're averaging 128 pass yards per game. The only teams averaging less: New Mexico State, UL Monroe, Air Force, and Army. What is only Air Force and Kennesaw averaging less than Michigan's 5.4 yards per attempt? What does Michigan need to do? They need to run the ball. What is Michigan State's strength? Run defense. The reason I was on them against Iowa last week, top 30 rush success rate. They have some issues defending explosive passes. Just like Iowa, Michigan has no explosiveness in their passing attack. None whatsoever. I know that, this is not like a buy low, sell high because Michigan lost last week. Michigan State upset Iowa. I don't care. I also think Jonathan Smith, who's been a wizard in the scripted portions of games, can get them a couple scores or even just a touchdown early. That's huge in this game against Michigan. That could be all the difference in a game with a super low total. By the way, Jonathan Smith, 16-7 against the spread, 69.6% as a road underdog of more than a field goal in his career, covered by about a touchdown per game. Both of these teams came off a bye last week, and that was important because they had a lot of turnover, staff turnover, roster turnover. Well, one of the teams looked like they fixed a lot of issues and used the bye to actually do something. The other didn't. Michigan is a mess right now. Huge coaching advantage for Michigan State. They have the better quarterback. I think it's going to be Tuttle again. Who knows who's even going to be under center for Michigan. They have an identity crisis. Michigan State, I'm sure, had this game circled as well. They got embarrassed on their home field to the eventual national champs last year. I think, 49-0. So, yeah, give me Michigan State. I think the Michigan misery continues. This team is lost right now. And basically, where are they at mentally? Right? Defending national champs, now suffered their third loss of the season. They're done. Their season's over. There's no Big Ten championship. There's no college football playoff. They're out of everything. I like Michigan State.
But we got that banner. We got that national championship. I'm sure that's on the minds of Michigan fans these days. I'm going to stay in the Big Ten. I saw this number all week. I was like, no, can't do it, but we're going to have to do it. And that's going to be Wisconsin hosting Penn State. And boy, if Wisconsin pulls this off, I've got some answering to do on the new BCS next week. It's a great situation spot for the Badgers here. Penn State has Ohio State on deck, and you have to think that that might already be in the mind of James Franklin. Not sure if that's in the mind of his coordinators, but Penn State has not won this game in Camp Randall by more than a TD since 2007. This has not been a great place for the Nittany Lions to go and play. Lots of noise around the program this week. James Franklin essentially controlling media questions like he's the People's Republic of China here. He's asked about rape allegations with former players. The media really coming down hard on him. A lot of noise surrounding this Penn State team as they're about to travel to Wisconsin and then play biggest game of their season next week against Ohio State. And I mean, that talks to their strength of schedule, which has been really poor, I think, in the 70s right now. So there have been a number of instances of them stumbling before Penn State. I'm going to throw UMass out from last year, but 5-7 Illinois won this game in 2022. Indiana won this game in 2020 with Michael Penix, 36-35. And Indiana nearly won this game against Penn State before Ohio State in 2019. So there's been some consistent issues and historically for Penn State in this position, but you really have to ask what is going on with this Wisconsin offense over the last two games. I get who their opponents are with Rutgers and Northwestern and their defenses, but 324 yards on the ground, 5.2 yards after first contact against Rutgers for Tawee Walker, who absolutely has taken off over the last two games. And you say, well, it's just the defenses that he's faced. We have not seen his yards after first contact be this high since. A 65% success rate, a 58% success rate in their previous two games on the ground. You go and look at the type of personnel and the formations and the run concepts that Wisconsin wants to run. It has been heavy outside zone. They want to go off the tackles. And on paper, when you look at Penn State, you're like, okay, they're third nationally in defensive rushing success rate. But remember, keep in mind, their strength of schedule is 70th. Look at some of these offenses they've faced. Who is the toughest rushing offense that they've had out there? There's not a lot. So, one concept that they have struggled with, and I would say struggle, Penn State has looked elite against every run concept, except for one. One of them they've been mid-FBS against, and that's outside zone, which is exactly what Wisconsin has come at them. You need more proof that Penn State's having problems against the rush? Penn State against USC. USC averaged 8.4 yards per play on the ground in 23 rushing attempts against Penn State. I don't know what's going on with that defensive line and the linebackers. That was horrific. It wasn't that great against other teams either, but the USC one really stuck out to me. Wisconsin, outside zone, Tawee Walker. It looks like it's going to be a problem for Penn State and an overlook spot when the Nittany Lions face Ohio State next week.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with this handicap of this one. I mean, it's a weird spot there. They are off a bye, but they have Ohio State on deck. I think Penn State should be able to run on Wisconsin. That's the weakness of their defense. Their defensive line isn't great. The Badgers aren't allowing any pass explosives. Penn State doesn't have any pass explosiveness right now. Can they just take away Tyler Warren? I think they have a couple guys to throw at him. The question is, can Penn State get back to hitting explosives on the ground? Where was that against USC? Where has that been in the last couple of games? That, I think, is the key here. The Badgers have been better at late. They haven't. The problem is the quality of competition. As you mentioned, they played Rutgers, Northwestern, and Purdue, three bottom feeders in the Big Ten, but they outscored them 117-16. So by over 100 points, you have to take that a bit serious. And you mentioned Tawee Walker has kind of unlocked this offense. They're feeding him, and that's setting up some more explosive passing plays down the field. Prior to these three games, they had almost negative explosiveness in the passing attack. They're getting some of that now, but Rutgers was beat up. The Purdue defense, we know how bad they are. Northwestern was pretty impressive, but they didn't have as much success running the ball. But they're definitely playing better. Can that translate to this week? The problem is, I think this number, I don't mind taking a shot on the money line.
It's going to go up.
But yeah, this number, because of the uncertainty with Wisconsin, are they this much better, or is it with the quality of competition? You do have a really good home field environment. By the way, since 2000, Wisconsin is the most profitable home dog of any college football team, minimum 10 games. I think they're 10-3 or 10-4 against the spread. The problem is I just can't get to this number. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
Penn State was laying, Alabama was laying 16.5, and that was with Van Dyke here. Now Alabama's under, why do I keep saying Alabama? Penn State is under a touchdown. So
I make it
yeah,
11. You're right. I make it 11. You're right.
yeah, I'm at like 8.5, 9. But there's some potential pass here for Wisconsin. Should be an intriguing game. All right, let's move on to fourth down. We're going to go for it. Our favorite bet. I'm going to go with the Mean Green down in Denton against Tulane. Catching anything over a touchdown is fine here. Tulane, they have been impressive. I think Mekhi Hughes will get his on the ground. North Texas run defense is not good, but I think that North Texas can keep up. And this is, Tulane really hasn't faced many passing attacks that can test them for 60 minutes. Louisiana was one, and Louisiana outplayed them. They just gave up a kick return touchdown and threw a pick six at the end of the first half. But they outplayed them statistically, were able to move the ball, put up 33 points. We saw Kansas State, even when Avery Johnson was struggling to throw the ball, they put up 34 on Tulane. That Oklahoma game, I think Oklahoma put up 30 plus, but Oklahoma's offense, we've seen how bad they are. This North Texas offense is legit. Chandler Morris is running that air raid with just extreme effectiveness. They're one of 4 teams in the country averaging over 360 passing yards per game, along with Ole Miss, Miami, and Syracuse. And Tulane, look, last week, talk about a box score fraud. They beat Rice by 2 touchdowns. They needed to score 14 unanswered in the fourth quarter to pull away. They were outgained by Rice. They had a +5 turnover margin in that game, and it was tied in the fourth quarter. On the season, Tulane +11 in turnovers, North Texas -4. Don't be surprised if there's some turnover regression there. I like the Mean Green at home. Head coach Eric Morris covered 6 straight at home since his debut against FBS foes. I make this like around 5, so give me North Texas.
Yeah, if you want to put that on the board, I don't know if we just take the points or if we just talk about it, but put it on the board because they are in the round robin video that'll be out on YouTube. Make sure and subscribe to our channel. If I do not get Stuckey to back me on this one, I don't know what we're going to do because I am fading BYU going down to the bounce house against UCF. Listen, Ja'Cory Brown.
They're already on the board. I bet this earlier.
It's already on the board. Woo! All right, here we go. So, yes, we're back on Central Florida. Can they win the Big 12? No, but we are back on betting them. Ja'Cory Brown has taken over Gus Malzahn's offense, and you can see just a clear difference. KJ Jefferson was a part of this offensive attack that, got into the top 5 territory as far as rushing success rate goes. But at some point, KJ stopped playing in it. He was a statue. He wasn't finishing plays. The zone read was with RJ Harvey was completely detectable because KJ did not finish anything about the play. He simply would show handoff and hand it off and wouldn't move. And you didn't fake out anybody at the edge position. And UCF really struggled on offense. Ja'Cory Brown, who can't throw the ball, but it doesn't matter, is running that inside zone read with RJ Harvey to a T. It looks great. Ja'Cory Brown himself.
By the way, we saw a less explosive version last week from a quarterback perspective with Rangel and Ollie Gordon before they both got hurt. Were running wild all over this BYU defense. It struggles to set the edge, struggles with mobile quarterbacks.
Yep. Yeah. And now here we have Brown and RJ Harvey last week going nuts on a defense we completely respect, which is Iowa State. Last week, Brown himself as a quarterback, 13 carries, 154 yards, 128 of that was off of zone read. 2 explosive runs against the Cyclones. UCF's offense, which is one of the top rushing offenses in the nation from a line yards and a rushing success perspective, is back. And they are re-energized by a quarterback that can actually take it to the house. BYU's defense, man, have we been waiting to pounce on these guys. BYU's defense, 84th in defensive line yards, 105th in defensive stuff rates. The Cougars are below average in success rate against inside zone. They allow explosives on 15% of attempts by opponents, which means, yes, you're going to see RJ Harvey and Ja'Cory Brown flying down the sidelines after running inside zone read. So the BYU offense, you have to ask yourself, Are they going to be able to step back and do what Jake Retzlaff has done? Now, I know everybody sees the 16-7 TD to INT ratio. That's not what the inside numbers say. It's an even big time throw to turnover worthy play at 9-9 there. He has not been as great as what his numbers say. UCF's coverage grade is actually 33rd. That's one of the better parts of their defense. They run a lot of cover 1 and a lot of cover 3, but you can bet your life that UCF is going to sit there and cover 3. Retzlaff has 224 dropbacks this season. He's been great against a lot of coverage looks, but out of 224 dropbacks this season, he's seen cover 3 107 times. He has a 43% success rate. That should be like 52. He has a negative EPA per pass. That's really bad. And he has a 9.3% negative play rate, which is monstrous. Retzlaff has been terrible against cover 3. We can actually depend on this UCF defense.
And he's going to have to throw because UCF has good run D.
Yeah, but more importantly, this UCF offense rushing attack is just going to go wild. So, yes, we're back on our Knights bullshit. Let's go. BYU's going down. Let's quit this playoff talk. Get them out of Brett's bracket. Wherever they're at, get them out.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, look, BYU's also been, not only has Retzlaff been lucky, their whole team has been lucky. I mean, they're 3-0 in one-possession games. They should have lost last week if Gordon and Rangel don't get hurt, and they don't. Oklahoma State just decides that they don't want to tackle on the final play of the game. But all of their games, they're 3-0 in one-possession games. But how about their blowout wins? They blew out Kansas State and Arizona by a combined 52 points. They were outgained 656 to 630 in those games. Well, how do they win? +6 turnover margin. Arizona and Kansas State went 1 of 7 on 4th down, and they had multiple non-offensive scores. It's just not sustainable. Yeah, I like this new UCF offense with Brown. And UCF at home in the bounce house, they didn't quit. 9-3 against the spread at home against ranked teams since 2005. 7-0 when there's a single-digit spread. And for what it's worth, we were questioning where UCF is at, and that's because of the quarterback. I don't know why they were starting the freshman, but they had some disappointing performances. But Colorado, Florida, and Cincinnati, those have aged pretty well. Those teams are all
pretty good.
trending up. So I agree with you. It's on the board as an agree. All right, that'll do it for 3 and Out. Again, make sure you hit that subscribe, like button. All right, before we sign off the board, no head-to-heads this week again. I'm 2-1 in head-to-heads. No head-to-heads. Although we're Washington, Indiana, but just at different numbers. Agree. We're 12-6 on the agrees this year. The agrees this week. We got 6 of them. North Texas, UCF, BG, Cincy, Rice, and Akron. And the trash, which is 7-3 on the year, 8-3 if you include Collins, Kent State, Akron, and Rice. Thanks to Collin for joining me. As always, thanks to our producer, Matt Mitchell, on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you check out the Group of 5 guys. Their episode is out now. We'll be back live show, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, Saturday. Voicemail, 959-BAD-BEAT for the recap episode, which will be out Monday morning. New BCS comes out early every week as well. Make sure you check out those episodes. Have some fun there. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy, leave a review, 5-star review, say whatever you want. Really helps us out. I think it's an underrated slate. I'm looking forward to it. Good luck on all of your wagers. We'll catch you all on Saturday morning. Cheers.
Peace out.